In royal times, death was not the worst fate. Being taken by a duke was. When a father failed to repay his debt, his daughter was not spared. She was claimed as compensation, as property, a living payment. This is the story of Rosalia. Her father's debt has already sealed her destiny. The duke is coming for her. So Rosalia makes a choice worse than fear. She abandons herself. She cuts her hair, binds her body, and steals the identity of her own brother, a gambler, a failure, a man who ruined everything. She becomes Antonio. Every breath is borrowed. Every word could betray her. One mistake, and she is no longer human in the eyes of the law. But the duke is not fooled easily. He watches. He questions. He gets close, too close. And Rosalia realizes something far more terrifying than discovery. The duke is drawn to her, not knowing who she truly is, not knowing what she's hiding. Is it suspicion or desire? If he uncovers the truth, she will be destroyed. If he doesn't, she may fall in love with the very man who can ruin her. Because this is not just a story of survival. It is a dangerous romance. A psychological game. A lie that grows heavier with every heartbeat. And in this world, love is the deadliest secret of all. Watch till the end. Because once the duke starts looking at her like this, there is no escape. And some episodes don't end with answers. They end with obsession. Episode 1. A man dressed in royal attire sat with his head lowered, one fist resting against his temple while his fingers tapped slowly, rhythmically. Several papers lay spread across the desk before him, untouched. The room was steeped in silence. Behind him stood a young boy, dressed smartly and neatly, posture straight and attentive, waiting patiently for an order from his master. The man had green hair, striking green eyes, and a perfectly chiseled jawline. Without lifting his head, he spoke. "Excuse me, sir. Did you call?" There was a pause. The boy hesitated, then asked again softly, "You called me?" The man finally responded, "Called for you?" "Of course, yes." The man seated at the desk was Duke Ruggleset Empire, Klaus de Balthazar. At once, the servant stepped forward. At the same moment, the Duke rose from his chair and turned to face him. The room was so silent that the sound of their footsteps echoed clearly. Suddenly, without warning, the Duke pushed the young boy back against the wall. His hand slammed beside the boy's head, pinning him there. Their faces were dangerously close, the Duke's presence overwhelming and threatening. The young boy dropped his head in fear. "I'm curious about something," the Duke said coldly. Still staring at the floor, the young servant replied nervously, "Pardon me, Your Grace." Curious about what? Instead of answering, the Duke leaned closer and began to sniff him. The action confused the boy. Then the Duke whispered sharply into his ear, anger thick in his voice. "Didn't I tell you not to wear that shitty perfume?" He stepped back slightly and said firmly, "Answer me." "I don't wear any perfume, Your Grace," the boy replied fearfully. That response only made the Duke angrier. "So all of you dare to defy me," he snapped, his voice filled with fury, "when I have already allowed you to repay your debt by serving me." He shouted the name with authority. Antonio D. Hissink. Hearing his own name sent a wave of fear through the young servant. "I told you," the Duke continued, his voice low and dangerous. "I am a master at finding hidden things. I will discover your secrets." Antonio's heart pounded violently. Did he really discover that I am actually a woman? She thought to herself. Her eyes shifted sideways unconsciously. "Stop trying to avert my gaze," the Duke ordered. He struck his hand against the wall again, trapping her once more. "You are only making me want to dig even deeper." Curiosity and anger mingled across the Duke's face. A few strands of his green hair fell onto his forehead, and even in his rage, he looked dangerously charming. Antonio, who was, in truth, a girl disguised as a boy, felt her thoughts spiral. Is he bisexual? She wondered. I disguised myself to avoid exactly this kind of situation. Lost in her thoughts and fear, she failed to notice one thing. The Duke had not looked away even once. His eyes were fixed on her, sharp and unyielding, as though he were already peeling away the layers of her disguise. 2 to 3 months earlier, a glass bottle shattered on the floor, the sharp sound echoing through the dimly lit room. A young woman with long green hair and green eyes startled violently. She was dressed in a beautiful blue gown, clearly a nightgown, her expression frozen in shock. Standing across from her was a man wearing a white shirt and brown trousers, clothes commonly worn by royals and nobles of the house. He shouted at her. "Why is the rum gone? Rosalia! Rosalia!" Rosalia de Hessink stood silently, staring at him in her blue nightgown. The boy shouted again, his voice slurred with anger. "Get me more booze." Rosalia looked confused, as if she were already exhausted by this endless drama. She was the adopted daughter of the house of Baron Hessink, Rosalia de Hessink, and the boy before her was the biological son of Baron Hessink, the heir to the house. He began shouting at her again. "What is it now? Did you already run out of money? I know father left you a lot. Where did it all go?" Inside her mind, Rosalia panicked. "No, no." But aloud she said, disbelief filling her voice, "Are you serious? You squandered it all?" He laughed bitterly and shouted again, "Well then, go find me something we can sell." Rosalia felt not only disappointed but deeply sad. She turned away and began walking, her thoughts racing. Our family has declined ever since Father Baron Hessing collapsed. Or died, she thought. Lost in those thoughts, she entered the kitchen. Her eyes fell on a sharp blade. Not a knife, a dagger. She picked it up. With the dagger in her hand, she walked back toward the boy. This man, the successor of Baron Hessing, was strong in body yet completely hollow inside. A total loser who had made her life unbearable. He had long since abandoned any sense of humanity. When he saw Rosalia approaching with the dagger, fear finally crossed his face. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "Why are you holding a knife? No, a dagger. Stay away." Rosalia spoke only in her mind. "It's about time I get rid of him." She raised the dagger as if she were about to strike. The boy screamed, sweat pouring down his face as he stumbled backward, terrified. "Stop! Stop!" he cried, squeezing his eyes shut. But when he finally opened them, something was wrong. Rosalia was standing calmly. Her long green hair was gone. Confused, the boy looked down and realized she had cut it off. Rosalia stepped forward and placed the severed hair into his hands. "Didn't you just ask me to find something we could sell?" she said quietly. "This is the last thing I have left. Take it. Sell it." Without hesitation or shame, the boy grabbed the hair and walked out of the house. After a brief pause, he turned back and spat an insult at her. "Cold-hearted," Rosalia repeated softly, almost to herself. "I am cold-hearted." A question lingered in her mind. Am I? Because I'm capable of being much harsher if my life depends on it. The thought made her feel strangely awkward as she stood alone in the silent house. On the southern streets, the cold cut through the air like a blade. Antonio staggered forward when suddenly 2 men came marching toward him. They blocked his path, their lips curling into devilish smiles. "You'll never be able to come back, Antonio," one of them sneered. "The creditors will be waiting for you, after all." They grabbed him roughly. "It's time to pay your gambling debt, Mr. Antonio." Antonio was terrified. He looked painfully weak now, dark circles hollowing his eyes. Rosalia was unaware of his condition. A few days later, she stood in her room, dressing quietly, her thoughts heavy. I'm not sure if he's even alive. She bound her chest tightly with a cloth, wincing slightly, then pulled on oversized clothes. As expected, she muttered to herself. These clothes are a bit big now. Once fully dressed as a man, she stood near a broken window and peeked outside. He'll be arriving soon, she thought. She was wearing Antonio's clothes. She was waiting for the man who held her life in his hands. Rosalia de Hessink, she thought bitterly. In the novel, Rosalia was merely a background character. She was sold to the Duke to pay off debts, used, and eventually died. And I just happened to be reborn as her. The Duke would try to take her as a maid in order to settle the debt. It's already been 3 years since I entered this novel, she realized. My life now is moving exactly along Rosalia's timeline. She took a deep breath. I've been preparing for this very moment, she whispered. Unlike the novel, I plan on staying alive. Rosalia from the original story fell in love with the Duke. Foolish, she thought. Very foolish. There are plenty of ways to pay off debt, she said to herself. The first rule is to avoid catching the Duke's attention. That was why she was dressed as a man. She lived in a grand mansion, but it was barely maintained. Its glory long faded. Soon, a man appeared at the estate. It was the Duke. He glanced at the mansion and remarked coolly, "What a humble abode." Beside him stood another man, who said respectfully, "Yes, Your Grace. This is the correct address." The Duke surveyed the building. Selling this estate won't even cover half what Baron Hessing owed. The man beside him checked the documents and began calculating. These records state that the Baron passed away. His eldest son, Antonio, inherited the estate. He also had a daughter, Rosalia de Hessink, reported to have died of illness a few days ago. What a pity, the Duke replied flatly. At that moment, the door creaked open. Rosalia, disguised as Antonio, stepped outside. You must be Duke Klaus de Balthazar, she said, looking directly at him. She extended her hand. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I am the son of the late Baron Hessink. Dressed in men's clothing, she looked unexpectedly delicate, almost cute. Inside her mind, she made herself a promise. I will never fall in love with the Duke. Rosalia, disguised as Antonio, extended her hand toward the Duke. I'm Antonio de Hessink, she said. The Duke's gaze dropped to her outstretched hand. His expression turned strange, unreadable. He did not take it. Instead, he said coldly, You should already know who I am. Rosalia felt a flicker of embarrassment and slowly withdrew her hand. She replied calmly, I can't imagine there's a soul in the Rue Calls-It Empire who doesn't know who you are, Your Grace. She offered a faint smile. The Duke, radiating an intense aura and an unshakable presence, responded sharply, Then you should also know why I'm here. His expression hardened, anger flashing in his eyes. I have come to collect the debt your father the Baron owes me. There was a brief pause. 5,000 virangs. The number hit Rosalia like a sudden blow. She gulped. With 5,000 virangs, she said carefully, one could buy 3 large mansions. Did we really have that much debt? She had known the estate was drowning in debt, but this was far beyond her imagination. The realization left her shaken. The Duke stepped away from her and moved toward the window. Looking out at the crumbling estate, he said coolly, Even if I sell this entire mansion, you would still owe me around 3,000 virangs. He turned back to her and folded his arms. So tell me, he continued, how do you intend to make up the remaining amount? Rosalia didn't answer immediately. Instead, she simply looked at him and smiled. The Duke frowned slightly. It doesn't seem like you're capable of paying me back anytime soon. Rosalia, still wearing Antonio's face, lowered her gaze, her eyes fixed on the floor. You're absolutely right, Your Grace, she said quietly. I can't repay you right now. A brief silence followed. Then she lifted her hand slightly, pointing as if she had something important to explain. The confidence in her gesture surprised the Duke. This was not what he expected from a so-called useless heir. When she raised her eyes again, there was a faint sparkle in them. But I will, she said firmly. I will repay the remaining 3,000 varangs within that time. Her voice was steady, certain. For the first time since arriving, the Duke looked at her with clear interest. The Duke turned toward Antonio, who was, in truth, Rosalia, and cast her a sharp sideways glance. Rosalia smiled at him. The Duke did not look away. He kept staring. The intensity of his gaze confused her. Unease crept up her spine, and a chill settled in the air around them. Then the Duke spoke. How? He asked coldly. How do you intend to pay me back? He paused, his eyes never leaving her face. You dropped out of the academy. Rosalia smiled again, this time with a hint of embarrassment. A tiny bead of sweat slid down her cheek. The Duke continued mercilessly. You are capable of very little, and I've heard you're a drunkard who wastes money. Rosia's smile didn't fade. He's not wrong, she thought. My brother truly is nothing more than a hopeless loser. But her thoughts sharpened. That's where he's wrong about me. I haven't been wasting my life away in back alleys. I have a weapon. She lifted her gaze and said aloud, I have a plan. The Duke responded with a single unimpressed sound. Oh? Oh. They began walking side by side through the hall. The Duke spoke again, almost lazily. So, you have an ace up your sleeve? Of course, Rosalia replied. But inside her mind, her thoughts raced. My weapon is knowledge. Knowledge from the novel. I know things that haven't happened yet. She thought of the Menestone mine, a discovery that would surface half a year from now. She thought of a ship laden with treasures, long sunk and forgotten. But the easiest path of all is art. Her thoughts drifted. The Crown Princess, the female protagonist, has a deep obsession with art. Rosalia imagined her clearly. A breathtaking princess in an elegant gown, long flowing hair, thick lashes framing sharp eyes, slender hands adorned with delicate fingers. She builds her fortune by discovering artists no one knows yet. The image shifted. The same princess now wearing a pearl necklace, radiant and untouchable. All I have to do is find them before she does. The thought lingered. Was this merely Rosalia's imagination? Or did she truly possess knowledge of a future yet to unfold? For now, the Duke walked beside her, unaware that the boy next to him might be holding the key to his own downfall, or his greatest temptation. Coming back to reality, Rosalia looked at the Duke and said clearly, I plan to buy valuable works of art using the information I've gathered from the street salon with my incredible eye for talent. There was a spark in her eyes as she spoke. Excitement crept into her voice and her hands lifted into the air unconsciously, moving as she explained her idea. The Duke watched her closely. Suspicion flickered across his face. That might work in theory, he said at last, his tone calm but sharp. But there is one major issue. He paused, his gaze narrowing. How do you intend to procure the money? He asked. To buy these pieces of art? The question hung heavily between them, cutting straight through her confidence. Cheekily, Rosalia said. A very good question, Your Grace. Every business venture needs capital. Obviously, the Duke replied coolly. And that, Rosalia said smoothly, is precisely what I wished to ask you about, Your Grace. A flicker of confusion crossed the Duke's eyes. He studied her in silence, clearly waiting for her to continue. Rosalia lifted a hand to her hair. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she let out a small, nervous giggle before lowering her voice. So, she said carefully, could you please lend me 20 varangs? For a brief moment, the tension cracked. The situation turned almost comical. The Duke had come to collect a debt, not to extend another loan. The Duke let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Huh, so your plan," he said slowly, "is to borrow even more money from me?" Rosia looked up at him with wide, earnest eyes and smiled. "Yes," she answered simply. "That's exactly what I'm asking, Your Grace." She took a breath and added softly, "Please, trust me. Just this once." The silence that followed was heavy, not with anger, but with something far more dangerous. Interest. Rosalia, still disguised as Antonio, lifted her chin and said with quiet confidence, "I will show you how 20 varangs can become 50 varangs in just 2 months." The Duke studied her in silence, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he spoke. "Fine. I will lend you the money." Relief flickered through Rosalia. That look on his face. She thought, "It feels suspicious." Still, she masked her unease with a polite smile. She bowed deeply, her movements careful and respectful. "Thank you very much, Your Grace." Before she could straighten her back, heavy footsteps echoed behind her. 2 bodyguards stepped forward. The Duke's voice followed, calm but absolute. "However, I have a condition." Rosalia's breath caught. When did they get here? She wondered. The guards moved in and seized her arms. Their grip was firm, painful enough to make her wince. "Huh?" she gasped, startled. "What just happened?" She struggled instinctively and turned toward the Duke. "Why are you dragging me away, Your Grace? I told you I will repay the debt." She barely finished speaking before the Duke began walking toward the main entrance, his footsteps unhurried. "Your Grace," she called out, panic creeping into her voice. He stopped and spoke without turning fully around. "Antonio," he said evenly, "how could I possibly trust you?" His tone remained composed, almost detached. "What if you simply spout nonsense and then disappear?" Rosalia clenched her jaw. "He's right," she admitted bitterly. "That's exactly the image my brother has left behind." Still, she twisted against the guard's hold. "Didn't I give you my word?" she insisted. "You can trust me, swear." "I believe you intend to repay me," the Duke replied coolly. "But where do you plan to stay while earning that money after I sell this mansion?" The words struck her like a sudden blow. She froze. She hadn't considered that at all. "Huh?" slipped from her lips. As the guards dragged her forward, the Duke spoke again. "I'll trust you this once, Antonio." He turned and fixed her with a sharp, penetrating gaze. "But you will remain where I can watch you until the debt is fully paid." His voice lowered. "You are bound to me until you are free of what you owe." Then he delivered the final sentence. "You are my servant now." Rosalia struggled weakly. "Come on. How is that fair?" The Duke didn't hesitate. "Because I said so." With that, he stepped outside, the heavy doors closing behind him. Rosalia's strength finally gave out. "I swore I would never become a maid," she thought, her chest tightening. "And yet, I've become the Duke's male servant." She lowered her head, humiliation and disappointment settling deep within her. What even is my life anymore?
El Dagro, one of the Duke's senior male servants, led Rosalia through the quiet, dimly lit halls and finally stopped before a door. "Here are your quarters, sir," he said politely, stepping aside. Rosalia entered and froze in her tracks. The room was far too spacious. Elegant drapes, polished floors, carved furniture, and warm golden lighting. It didn't look like a servant's room at all. "This doesn't look like a servant's quarter," Rosalia whispered. Elgandro's expression remained calm. "Well," he said, "you're not just a servant. His Grace considers you his business partner as well." Rosalia stiffened immediately. "And that," he continued, "is why your room has been placed right beside the Duke's office." Rosalia's eyes widened. He pointed casually. "It's right there." Barely a 5-second walk. She felt the shock crash over her. This is not what I wanted at all, she thought miserably. This is the exact opposite. Please follow me, Alejandro said. I'll show you around the mansion. Rosalia nodded weakly, her mind still spinning. At least I don't have to share quarters with the other male servants, she thought, trying to stay optimistic. But as Alejandro guided her through the enormous mansion, Rosalia barely listened. Every step made her shoulders heavier. The palace felt too big, too lavish, too suffocating. Then, a girl in a beautiful blue gown suddenly sprinted down the hallway. "My lady!" a maid shouted, chasing behind her. The girl tripped. Before she could fall, Rosalia instinctively reached out and caught her. The girl blinked up at her. "How long are you planning to hold me?" she demanded bluntly. Rosalia let go instantly. Sorry." The girl tilted her head. "I haven't seen you around here before." Another maid arrived, panting. "Oh, my lady." My lady? Rosalia thought. Is she royalty? Or the Duke's sister? The girl's expression brightened. "You're pretty," she said suddenly. "I like pretty things." Rosalia froze. The girl clapped her hands and declared, "I'll take you as my eldest domestico starting today." "What?" Rosalia cried. An eldest domestico, the decorative, handsome servant aristocratic women kept for show. I've heard of that ridiculous trend, Rosalia thought, horrified. "I'm sorry, my lady, but the girl cut her off, waving one hand. "Anyway, you're coming with me to my meeting room tomorrow, don't forget." Before Rosalia could respond, the princess's maid sprinted down the hallway. "My lady, you still need your skin treatment." "No," the girl screamed and ran off laughing. The servant sighed and turned to Rosalia. "How fortunate," he said, "to catch Lady Balza's eye on your first day." Rosalia forced an awkward smile. Is that fortunate? She wondered helplessly. That night, Rosalia dropped onto her bed like a stone. I don't have time to follow around some rich, self-absorbed girl, she thought irritably. I promised the Duke 500 virangs in 2 months. He'll eat me alive if I fail. She glanced toward the door. Where is El Genro? He was supposed to bring the money today. Exhaustion swept through her. I just need to rest. It was her first night in the Duke's mansion, and everything already felt too much. Assuming no one would visit at such an hour, she loosened the bindings around her chest. Instant relief washed through her. "Ah," she whispered. "These things are torture." She lay back, finally able to breathe. Knock. Her heart dropped. "Who is it?" she snapped, scrambling to rebind herself, but her hands shook too much and the knocking kept coming. "Alejandro?" she called. The door opened. Klaus stepped inside. "I thought El Genro was coming," Rosalia said before she could stop herself. The Duke flashed a teasing smile. "He went out to take care of something, so I came instead." He held out an envelope. Then his eyes landed on the large vase she was holding. "Why are you holding a vase?" Rosalia blinked. "I didn't like where it was, so I was moving it." "At midnight?" the Duke asked, visibly thrown. "Yes." He stared, speechless. Then he cleared his throat. "Here, the promised 20 virangs." "My hands are busy," Rosalia said quickly. "Please place it somewhere." "I haven't decided where to put it yet." The Duke sighed deeply. "Then what do you want me to do?" She pointed at the vase. "Just put it in there." He hesitated, then obeyed. And with that, Rosalia's first day at the Duke's mansion ended. Her dignity barely intact, her sanity hanging by a thread, and her disguise dangerously close to falling apart.